The night my parents said it out loud, there were 12 of us around the table. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and lemon. The same meal my mother made whenever she wanted things to feel normal. My father sat at the head of the table, napkin folded precisely on his lap, already tired in the way he always looked when the family gathered. My older sister laughed loudly at something my brother-in-law said. My younger brother scrolled on his phone with one hand and reached for bread with the other. I had arrived early, helped set the plates, poured the wine, and taken the chair closest to the kitchen door so I could keep getting up without being asked. We were talking about holiday plans, or rather, they were talking. I was listening and nodding when it seemed appropriate. My mother was listing dates, flights, hotels. My sister interrupted her twice, and my mother let her. When I tried to add something about my work schedule, my father raised a finger, not at me exactly, just into the air, the universal signal that someone else would speak first. He finished his thought. Then my sister jumped in again. At some point, my mother looked at me with the faint smile she used when she was already irritated. She asked if I could adjust my time off so the family wouldn't have to plan around me. I said I could try. That was when my sister sighed and said, "It's always like this." My father didn't look at me when he answered. He cut into his chicken carefully, the knife making a soft sound against the plate. "Well," he said, "you're always last, you know that." The table went quiet for a moment, not because anyone was shocked, but because the sentence landed cleanly. It wasn't an insult dressed up as a joke. It wasn't an argument. It was a statement of order. My mother nodded once as if this had already been agreed upon years ago. My brother looked up from his phone and smirked. My sister took a sip of wine and leaned back in her chair. I waited for someone to soften it. For my mother to say he didn't mean it like that. For my father to glance at me and correct himself. None of that happened. Conversation resumed. Dates were finalized. Flights were booked. In theory, I was asked to pass the salt. I did. I didn't feel embarrassed in the way people expect. My face didn't burn. My heart didn't race. What I felt was recognition, something settled, heavy and solid, right behind my ribs. I had known this sentence my whole life. It had just never been spoken so plainly before. After dinner, I helped clear the table. My mother thanked me for coming. My father asked if I could look at his printer the next time I visited, because it was acting up again. My sister hugged me with one arm and whispered that I shouldn't take things so personally. I drove home alone, hands steady on the wheel, radio off. That night, I lay awake replaying moments that had always felt slightly off, but had never formed a complete picture. Every time I had rearranged my schedule so someone else wouldn't be inconvenienced, every holiday I had worked through so my siblings could travel, every emergency call that came to me first, not because I was closest, but because I was reliable. The one who would say yes. When I was younger, being last felt like being flexible, being mature, being the one who could handle it. My parents praised me for that. They told relatives how independent I was, how little I needed. They said it with pride, as if my absence of need was a virtue they had carefully raised into me. The pattern became clearer as I got older. My sister's problems were discussed at length. My brother's ambitions were encouraged, funded, defended. My setbacks were acknowledged briefly, then folded into a suggestion that I would figure it out. I always did, or at least I made it look that way. When my marriage ended, my mother asked if I was sure I had tried hard enough. When my sister divorced 2 years later, my parents paid for her lawyer. When my brother lost his job, my father made calls. When I changed careers, I didn't tell anyone until it was already done. I had learned early that visibility was a risk, that asking invited assessment, that needing meant disappointment. It was easier to be last than to be seen reaching and coming up short. The dinner changed something because it removed the illusion that this was accidental. It wasn't busyness or oversight, it was order. A hierarchy that had been quietly maintained for decades. And I had helped maintain it by staying in my place. 2 weeks later, I ended up in the hospital. It wasn't dramatic, no sirens, no collapse. I had been ignoring chest tightness for months, telling myself it was stress, posture, anything but something worth stopping for. One afternoon at work, my vision narrowed and my hands started to shake. A colleague noticed and insisted on driving me to urgent care. From there, things moved quickly. Tests, monitoring, a doctor with tired eyes and a careful voice. I texted my family from the hospital bed. Just an update, I wrote. Nothing serious yet. My sister replied with a thumbs up emoji. My brother asked if I needed him to pick up anything for our parents. My mother called an hour later, already irritated. She said she was in the middle of something and asked if I could call back later. With the important parts, the doctor came back with results, not life-threatening, but not nothing. A condition that explained the symptoms and came with clear instructions: rest, reduced workload, follow-up appointments. He asked about my support system. I said I had family nearby. He nodded and wrote something down. I was discharged the next morning. I drove myself home. Over the next few weeks, my parents checked in sporadically. My mother reminded me to take my medication. My father asked if I had looked up the condition online. My sister complained about her own stress during a phone call that lasted 40 minutes, during which she never asked how I was feeling. I listened. I always did. At my follow-up appointment, the doctor was more direct. He asked about my workload, my home life, the people I relied on. I answered honestly this time. I told him I was the one people relied on. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a long moment. Before saying that being dependable was not the same as being supported, he suggested a few changes. Some practical, some uncomfortable. He recommended a short medical leave. He wrote it into my chart and handed me paperwork, authority in black ink, something tangible. I drove home and sat in my car for a long time before going inside. That evening, my parents called. My mother said they were planning another dinner, this time for my father's birthday. She wanted to know if I could host because my apartment was more central. I told her I couldn't. I said it calmly. I said I was on medical leave and needed rest. There was a pause on the line, the kind that meant recalculating. Well, she said, we've all got things going on. I know, I replied. She asked if I could at least help organize it, make some calls, handle the logistics. I told her I wouldn't be able to do that either. Another pause. This one longer. My father took the phone. He said he didn't understand why I was being difficult. I told him I wasn't. I told him I was following medical advice. He said doctors always exaggerated. He said stress was part of life. He said my sister had stress too and still showed up. I listened. When he finished, I told him I wouldn't be hosting or organizing anything. I said it once. I didn't explain further. He said he would talk to me later when I was feeling better. After I hung up, my hands shook, not from fear, from unfamiliarity. I had stepped out of sequence, and my body didn't know what to do with that yet. Over the next month, I did what the doctor told me to do. I rested. I went to appointments. I declined invitations. Each time I said no, my family reacted with confusion, then irritation, then dismissal. My sister accused me of being dramatic. My brother joked about me taking a vacation. My mother reminded me of everything she had done for me growing up. The words didn't hurt as much as they used to. They sounded rehearsed, like lines from a play I had finally stepped out of. The turning point came at another family gathering. This one unavoidable. My grandmother's will was being discussed. She had passed quietly a few months earlier, and the executor had requested a meeting. A lawyer sat at the end of the table this time. Files neatly stacked. My parents were subdued, my siblings unusually attentive. The lawyer spoke clearly: assets, accounts, property. Then he mentioned a document my grandmother had added in the last year of her life. A letter of intent. He explained that it wasn't legally binding in the way the will was, but it clarified her reasoning. He read from it. My grandmother wrote about watching her grandchildren grow, about noticing patterns, about seeing who carried weight quietly, who showed up without recognition, who made things easier for everyone else at a cost to themselves. He said my name. The room shifted. Not dramatically. Chairs creaked. Someone cleared their throat. The lawyer continued. My grandmother had left me a larger portion of her estate, not because she loved me more, but because she believed I had been expected to need less and give more. And she wanted to correct that imbalance in the only way she could. My mother protested. Immediately, she said it wasn't fair. My father asked if the document could be contested. The lawyer answered calmly. He said the will was solid. He said my grandmother had been of sound mind. He said the distribution would proceed as written. I didn't say anything. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my hands folded in my lap and listened. After the lawyer left, my family turned to me. My sister demanded to know if I had influenced our grandmother. My brother asked if I was planning to share. My mother cried and said she felt betrayed. I waited until they were done. Then I told them I hadn't known about the letter. I told them I wouldn't be discussing the inheritance further. I told them I needed to leave. My father stood up and blocked my path. He said I was being selfish. He said family didn't keep things from each other. I looked at him and said that family also didn't announce at dinner that one member was always last. The room went silent again. This time, it stayed that way. I walked out. In the weeks that followed, the distance grew. Calls stopped coming as frequently. Invitations slowed. When they did reach out, it was cautious, transactional. My mother asked if I could help her understand the legal paperwork. I referred her to the lawyer. My sister asked if I was upset. I said I was setting boundaries. The money didn't change my life in the way people imagine. It gave me options. It paid for medical care without stress. It allowed me to reduce my hours permanently. It created space. The real shift was internal. I no longer rearranged myself to fit into a role that diminished me. On my father's birthday, they had dinner without me. I sent a card. It was polite. It was brief. He thanked me a week later. We are not estranged, we are not close. There is a new distance that feels deliberate rather than painful. When we speak, it is on terms I recognize. I am no longer the default. I am no longer last. Sometimes I think about that dinner, the way the sentence sounded when it was finally spoken. I am almost grateful it was said aloud. It gave me something solid to respond to, not anger, not revenge. Just truth, acknowledged and answered with action. I didn't stand up in the way people expect. I didn't confront them with speeches or demands. I stood up by stepping back, by listening to authority when it finally named what my body had been carrying, by accepting that love without consideration is not something to keep earning. I still show up for myself. That has been the quietest and most lasting reversal of all.